afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for joining us, or to newcomers that are joining us for today's session for the Prison and Probation Research Hub. Here we are with Lola in tow. There she is. I hope she's going to behave. But the star of our show today is a very good friend, colleague, peer of mine, Dr. Sarah Nixon from the University of Winchester. An active researcher, passionate lecturer in criminology, ex-prison officer. And today we're going to hear about Sarah's work. She's revisited some of her PhD or doctoral research and has produced a publication around the application of the 12-step program and its appropriateness to desistance and desistance journeys. And I love the title of this presentation. I've never been arrested at a 12-step meeting. So please post your comments and questions to Sarah. We'll have time at the end. And equally, Sarah is very open to having dialogue outside this session, so we can make that information available to you. I'm sure if you search for Dr. Sarah Nixon, you will find her. So thanks again for joining us today. Sarah, are you there? Hello.
Yep.
Welcome.
Hello.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning you've contributed to one of our sessions. We were just reminiscing, weren't we, 2 years ago with our good colleague Kath Wilson, where you presented for us as well. So here we have you again. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sarah. So yes, look forward to your presentation, Sarah, and I'm sure we'll get lots of comments and questions from the audience. I know I will certainly have some. So over to you when you're ready. Enjoy.
Thank you. I'm just going to set a timer, Vic, so I don't waffle on for too much. Hi, everyone. My name's Sarah. I'm here today to talk to you about 12-step programs and the kind of links we might be able to make between that and understanding criminal desistance. Like Vic said, I work at the University of Winchester, so I've popped my email address there if anybody has any questions beyond this presentation. Okay, so... Yep, I've titled this presentation, I've never been arrested at a 12-step meeting. And I'll explain where that's come from later on. I'm just going to give you an overview of the presentation so far. Okay, so I'm going to just describe what I kind of did with the data that I originally gathered for my PhD and the rationale behind how I link 12-step program participation and the structural and functional mechanisms of what I think can support criminal desistance around desistance supporting domains, for example, employment and parenting, family, building relationships. There are limitations with this application, very small sample size, for example, and but there are, for me, I felt there was enough to kind of link the two together in a way that's maybe not happened before, certainly around 12-step programs. Obviously, that is only one way of people recovering from substance misuse. I'm going to talk a little bit about who I am and how my positionality has influenced how I originally collected the data, but also how I reanalyzed it to come up with the themes that I am going to present for you. I'm going to give you a brief overview of 12-step programs and the principles and traditions. I've got no idea who's on here. I've got no idea of your understanding. So I'm going to keep it a light touch. Like I said, there are 4 themes that I've identified. And, I'm going to finish off as well with a reiteration of how this can give hope for ex-offenders or current serving prisoners, for example. And why does this matter? With some sort of implications on how criminal justice practitioners might interpret this hopefully new knowledge in an application within their own practices. So that's where we're going to go for the next 40 minutes. So yeah, originally in 2013, I started a PhD through De Montfort University, supervised by Professor Rob Canton. We Decided to look at desistance through how peer support engagement, both in prison and in the community, might support criminal desistance. So originally in 2014, I interviewed 19 prisoners and 19 probationers and former probationers. And that was my original data set. Roll on a few more years. I think I started to look at this in 2021 when we were in lockdown. So it took me over 2 years to get this paper from an idea to being published through the British Journal of Community Justice. So yeah, I looked at my data again in 2021. And I've got experience both personally and professionally with working in criminal justice. Like Vic says, I'm an ex-prison officer. I'm also in a 12-step program. So I have that unique, maybe not unique, but insider positionality, which has kind of shaped my understanding and interpretation. I'm quite happy to talk to you about my own involvement with 12-step programs. I'm happy to break my own anonymity around that. Obviously, I won't reveal too much, but it's really important for people to understand where I am, where I've come from, and how I feel that what I'm saying has authenticity, because I understand what it's like to be in a 12-step program. So yeah, the themes I've identified, I'm going to go through in a little bit, and how it can help to support desistance and generate hope, which is the focus of this presentation. So the rationale for doing this is quite simple. There's not an awful lot of literature around this. You know, there are people who focus on recovery, David Best, for example, and 12-step programs are only one way of doing recovery. There are recovery programs, you know, rehab facilities that are maybe some way linked to criminal justice in ways, you know, through court orders or probation requirements. 12-step programs are very different. There are no requirements through criminal justice to attend. So I kind of wanted to try and marry these ideas up. The drugs crime nexus is very complex, and trajectories through one and the other may not be in any way parallel or, you know, joined up. But I feel I've got enough to kind of make some claims about how 12-step programs might support criminal desistance. My sample's not representative. It's just a snapshot of 7 people who spoke passionately and convincingly about how 12-step programs are helping them and the ways in which it's helping them. It's important to understand that not all people in 12 steps have committed criminal offences. Some have got no involvement with the criminal justice system whatsoever. However, the people I'm talking about have very sort of lengthy career criminal trajectories. Hence why I've selected them to present these ideas. I knew all of the participants through both professional and personal connections. I've said that already. And if we look at the desistance literature, this was the mainstay of my PhD. Desistance and things that support desistance can give hope and motivation, allowing people to give something back, supporting other people, building things like social capital, using the self as an expert by experience and a wounded healer. You know, I looked at this in many peer support and different peer support domains. It's really important for people working with offenders to believe in them, validate their newly emerging identities, and kind of give them hope, inspiration, and give them that self-belief. So I think there's a lot of parallels between that and what 12-step programs give. The people I'm going to talk to you about have gone on to develop roles that give them a stake in conformity. They have trust placed in them today. They are given positions of responsibility, which can kind of mirror with the process of tertiary desistance. And again, when I present my data, this will hopefully have more relevance. New identities linked to conformity, desistance and making good can also be applied to the new identities that emerge through 12-step programs. David Best suggests that there is little shared learning across these ideas, these areas, which presents the rationale for me trying to link them together. And Shad Maruna says that substance use and crime are so closely related that the study of desistance is almost necessarily a study of abstaining from both types of behaviours. So hopefully that sets the foundations for why I feel that these two areas can be married up. My positionality is as follows. I served at HMP Leicester between 2003 2009. So obviously I've been out of the system for about 14 years. So, but even back then, when I was working in the prison, I understood from my own behaviors that I was using alcohol in a way that wasn't necessarily safe or healthy for me. If anybody has read any of my other pieces of work, the stress of the job, the post-traumatic stress that comes with it, the things that you see that you can't unsee, alcohol is very much intrinsic to the coping mechanisms of prison officers. So I'm not blaming HMPPS. I certainly identified a problem with alcohol back then. And I'm happy to talk to anybody about this, because I feel that through presenting this as a former practitioner, but also somebody working in academia, it might help somebody somewhere to build on their own working practices. I've said already, I went to the same prison to collect my PhD data, and why I feel in some way legitimized to write this paper and interpret the data as I have is because I get the program. I understand how it works, how it fails to work if you don't work it and let up on the program. Recovery in 12 steps can be, marred by relapses, not doing the things that we place emphasis on, and things start to unravel quite quickly. I have experience of both. So when the people were talking to me about their own highs and lows, challenges and successes, I understand that journey. I speak the same language as them. I get it, basically. So I think my insider positionality, looking at both sides, working and talking to a lot of people who've done prison time, they know I'm an ex-prison officer, that anonymity we're given in meetings and that safe space to share. There is no us and them. Addiction, alcoholism cuts across all boundaries, whether you're on one side of the law or the other side of the law. And that for me and other people as well, that forum for sharing experience, strength and hope is really strong. And it's something that I practice today as we speak. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview of 12-step programs. Now, there are a variety of 12-step programs. We have AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. We have NA, Narcotics Anonymous. And we have CA, Cocaine Anonymous. All NA and CA are based on the foundation set by AA. I belong to Cocaine Anonymous. It's a non-drug specific fellowship. It doesn't matter what substance you've used. It's not specifically around drugs. My problem is alcohol. I just find the format and the way we engage with the program is more solution focused, and the immediacy with which we get through the 12 steps is a little bit more pronounced than AA, which I tried and didn't really stick with. So all of the people in my sample are not AA. They are either Narcotics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous. Not that matters so much. It's just a variation on a theme. Meetings are, with Zoom certainly coming into obviously the pandemic, meetings now are 24/7 all over the world, which is great for people who are isolated, who maybe have a fear of going out, and we get to hear people from all over, different continents, different time zones, which is amazing. And it's really opened up the social network. 12-step program is quite simple. I've heard it explained in lots of different ways. It's a design for living. It's giving people the tools to cope with life. People become quite hung up on the whole God dimension of 12 steps. Essentially, it's belief in a power that is bigger than you and also bigger than the substance you're trying to get rid of and try to control or become abstinent from. I call mine God. The religious aspect is tricky because some people walk out the door and never come back. But essentially, it's a spiritual program, and it's following a few simple rules, and it's a design for living. It's a roadmap to cope with life on life's terms. The way we see alcohol and drugs, we don't see them as the problem. We see them as the solution to the problem, which is us. And I have a lot of ex-offenders who identify with a myriad of problems caused through criminality. That's why I decided to write this paper, because I understand what they're talking about. Addiction is seen as an illness in 12-step that only a spiritual program can overcome, one day at a time. That's the acronym there. People come into 12-step recovery having tried many options. Nobody comes into a 12-step meeting because there's nothing on telly. People actually come because they think that this is probably the last chance they've got. Not always, but I just hear the same things repeated all of the time. 12-step program gives self-insight, introspection. It allows us, through doing the program and the work, to look inwardly at ourselves. We spend our whole lives blaming other people for why we act out and why we behave in certain ways. So this is a chance for us to look at the fears and harms, resentments, and what part do we actually play in the harm of others through addiction. Part of the process is making amends to people we have hurt, and there's lots of lists to write, and there's lots of soul searching and fact finding. I think that the process of going out and making amends to people we have hurt, if it's safe to do so, is quite closely linked to restorative justice. That process of sitting down with somebody and admitting the harm that you've done and the wrong that you've done is really quite powerful. So the parallels with restorative justice are quite clear there. We have a series of routines that we do on a daily basis, just to stay connected and present in the day. We don't worry about yesterday because it's gone. We don't worry about tomorrow because it's not here yet. Obviously, there are exceptions to that, but commitment to this program is quite intensive. However, I've heard it said many times that the actual intensification of waiting for your dealer or going to the shop, drinking, recovering from drinking, hiding, lying to people, actually commitment to this program is not that intensive compared to the alternatives. As we talk about the structural and functional mechanisms of 12-step programs and how they might support other domains, there's a negotiated order to everything. There's a requirement to turn up on time, ring your sponsor on time, wait to be asked to speak in meetings, don't just shout out. All of these kind of etiquettes kind of set people back on track in terms of manageability and how to work and negotiate boundaries within a group setting. So that's kind of really where I wanted to go with this, without looking too in depth at the whole spirituality and God part of the program. We get a sponsor to help us. That is somebody who is a little bit more further down the line than us, somebody to guide us. And that relationship kind of mirrors stuff that is going on within the desistance sort of world at the moment around peer support and peer mentoring. So that's how I've made that link as well. There's a massive connection given through 12-step programs. I'm on loads of WhatsApp groups. People message all of the time, people reach out with meetings. It allows for connection. It allows for unity, things that people in addiction may have lost. So the social kind of function around experience and sharing contacts with people is massive to fill that void in people's lives. We express gratitude every day. We write a gratitude list in the morning. We post it on WhatsApp. 10 things we're grateful to have in our life today. 5 things we're grateful that we don't have to do today. And I love reading other people's as well, because it gives me hope. And I know other people comment back on other people's hopes. And it's just a real way of connecting. 12-step programs are free. There are no dues or fees for membership. All you have to do is, if you've got a couple of quid, you stick it in the pot to support things like tea and coffee, if it's a physical meeting, or to support Zoom platforms. It's not linked to other organizations. Each 12-step group is fully autonomous. Membership is fluid. Relapses are part of the journey. And there's always that welcome with open arms when people come back. Again, just building hope that just keep coming back, or even just stay, don't go away in the first place. So that kind of hope narrative just underpins everything that I'm saying. So when we look at other programs of recovery, this is less defined by a binary success or failure. Continuous growth along spiritual lines is what we say, progress, not perfection. If you fuck it up, just come back the next day, be honest about what you've done, and people will be there to support you. Somebody said in a meeting once that 12-step programs help them to be less of an arsehole today than they were yesterday. And I thought maybe it is just that simple. It's a program. It's like a roadmap to have a nice, honest life filled with joy and hope, rather than just the treadmill and the rat run of constant addiction and self-loathing and everything that goes with that. Okay, we talk about 12-step sponsorship. We talk about what helping others can do to help the person themselves. So the parallels with peer mentoring support literature is quite high. Maruna talks about ex-offenders who find ways to make meaningful contributions to society through mentoring. assisting and enhancing the lives of other people, appear to be more successful at giving up crime. And obviously through the mentoring process of 12-step sponsorship, that's what Maruna's talking about. And if these achievements are formally recognised by others, then the effect may be stronger. Now, I'm talking formally recognised as people who work within criminal justice. If anybody takes anything from this presentation and changes the way they work with people who say 12 steps is working for them, then that is my job well done. People who help other people use themselves as experts by experience. They use their experiential knowledge to help other people, self as a source of wisdom. And it has that mutuality of helping both the mentee and the mentor. In Desistance, we talk about the concept of generativity, helping the next generation, helping other people. And McNeil and Maruna say that at the heart of effective practice with offenders should be the development, encouragement, and facilitation of generativity. 12-step program is one way of expressing generativity. And the amount of people that I see, not so much the sample I interviewed a long time ago, that's my data, but I know on a day-to-day basis the effort that people put in to making themselves available to help other people. They don't get paid for it. They do it out of the goodness of their heart. That is something that I'm really passionate about. Okay, so in terms of my method, a bit of a light touch. I looked at my data, looked at 38 transcripts, picked out 7 that made specific reference to 12-step, and just had a look and isolated the quotes that were relevant to that process. It's a snapshot rather than a longitudinal study. These people were interviewed 7 or 8 years ago. I know most of them are still in active service, 12-step recovery and desistance. A couple of them I've lost touch with, but the whole point was not to follow them longitudinally. It was just to see what they're doing, how they're doing it at that particular time. A lot of the participants out of the 7 were multiple peer support programs. So they were volunteering for probation or working alongside the criminal justice drugs team. Over half of them were actually paid within the criminal justice system, having used peer mentoring, peer support and 12-step as a stepping stone to become part of the criminal justice network. And the themes I identified from an analysis of those quotes suggested that 12-step programs allow people to change their playground. I heard that said a couple of times, and provide a hook for change. Now, hook for change is a part of a desistance framework, but I actually thought that 12-step programs can be also a hook for change, something to latch onto because other things haven't worked. The commitment to the ritualistic practices of 12-step program can give structure, discipline, and manageability. Some things that I think that when you're in the madness and the chaos of active drinking and using and criminality, these things go by the wayside. So there was something in the narratives that allowed me to identify that as a theme. Helping others, which I've said already. So the 12-step sponsorship process and the transmission of experience, strength, and hope. There's many different ways in which this manifests itself, both in meetings and outside of meetings, 24/7. You know, people make themselves available when others are in crisis. And the last theme I identified was playing by the rules, hence the title. I've never been arrested at a 12-step meeting. There's something about engagement with the program that gives people, career criminals, a sense of conformity. And that spills over into other aspects of their life and allows them to then hold down jobs, be present for their kids, be present for their wives. And there's a lot of people in 12-step as well who express gratitude to their partners for the support and time it takes. Certainly my partner knows that when I'm on a meeting, I'm on a meeting, and that's what I have to do every day. There's something also about moral agency, which links in with desistance. Certainly the model I use for my PhD around Giordano's cognitive transformational model. When you get to the point where you are through the model and you develop a replacement self, you are now in a position where it's no longer appropriate for you now to do something like you used to. That's the desistance dimension. But I also hear parallel narratives within 12-step, because they've gone through the program, they live their lives along honesty, trust, all the principles that we adhere to, it is no longer appropriate to behave in the ways that we used to. So again, that's another parallel. What I'm not claiming is that these 7 people are representative of all recovery and desistance trajectories. Not at all. It's just hoping to contribute to a really sort of under-theorized linkage between desistance and recovery. So I'm just going to present a little bit of data for you. Just checking the time. You can get a little bit more of this if you read the paper. I think Vic's made it available, and I've certainly put the link up at the end of my PowerPoint. So I'm just going to present some of the quotes, which will then I'll try and unpick for you guys. And if you have any questions, please do so ask. So in terms of 12-step program to change playground and provide a hook for change, LG says that he got introduced to NA by someone he used to do crimes with and take drugs with. And that's what sealed it for him. Meeting guys in recovery, changing my playground, staying away from the people involved in negativity, just supporting each other. He suggested that I come to a meeting, and from there I haven't looked back. At the time of interview, LG was about 7 years, and I bumped into him in lockdown, which added another couple of years on. And I know him, I know his story very well. He hid away a little bit in 12-step to get away from his drug dealers who he owed a lot of money to. But actually, he decided to stay. And then he built this whole recovery network around people like him who wanted to get well and wanted to stay away from further offending and drug using. We talk about a hook for change. That was certainly the way that LG got introduced to NA. Somebody presented that for him as a way of tackling his drug addiction. What we're talking about here in terms of people who get involved in 12 steps is nobody's forced to go there. So there's a lot of personal agency to get yourself through the door. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of confidence as well. Some people don't come back, some people stay. But we're talking here about that personal agency, which needs to be recognized. Nobody's forcing you to do it. Nobody's going to send you to prison, back to prison, or breach your license if you don't do 12-step programs. So there's something about the agency involved in seeking out this hook for change and latching onto it with enthusiasm. Often it's former criminal peers who are a little bit further down the line who are presenting as recovering, out of the chaos of criminality, stayed out of prison for a little while. That becomes attractive to certainly the people that I know quite closely. And then it's almost that desire and that enthusiasm becomes more powerful than the law of further using and crime. And these former criminal peers become role models. I talk about a hierarchy of influence. That's certainly the way 12-step programs work. Whilst it's democratic, there are people who are slightly ahead of you in their clean time or sober time, who might have a little bit more experience and understanding of the program, in which case they can role model and sort of present what success looks like if you stick to the program. The second theme is the commitment to the ritualistic practices of 12-step programs. It takes a little bit of time and practice to get into the habit of doing things, but it's like any habit. Once you've done it enough, it becomes part of your day, like brushing your teeth in the morning or taking the dog for a walk or whatever. And this is DD who talks about his engagement. And he's a really, really interesting case study that I want to spend a bit of time talking about, because what he's got back through 12-step, having been in prison for over 20 years, off and on, half his life, to be fair, what he has and what he attributes to 12-step as keeping him out of prison and over 10 years clean and sober is worth listening to. So he says, I do a lot of sponsoring in CA. That takes up a lot of my time doing that stuff, going to meetings, taking people through the big book of AA, going and sharing at conventions, like big events, ringing my sponsor, doing my daily inventory, prayers and meditation. My wife thinks she's a CA widow, but if I don't do this stuff, I'm heading straight back out there to drugs and crime. Even after 10 years, he knows that he has to do this every day for the rest of his life, because otherwise he will lose what he's got. And he has a lot today. He came out of prison. He's married to a police officer, but he's on a life license for violence. So I think his story has a lot of weight and depth in understanding the importance he places on 12-step to keep him out of prison. Okay, another guy, JG, says that the moment I admitted that my life had become unmanageable, I started to move on and living became easier. What I needed to do now was immerse myself within the recovery world. So I replaced all the negative people, places, and things. I would go to 12-step groups every evening, and all day my day was structured with positive people, places, and things. People kept saying to me, if you want what we have and you like what you see, do what we do. Get a sponsor, work the 12 steps, and be abstinent. That kind of hit home. I wanted what they have got. I want that recovery. It's very attractive to me. It was the ethos of freedom from active addiction. It might sound a little bit like being told what to do. It might sound a little bit sort of authoritarian from the way that quote's presented. But actually, if people want to have that wellness and that progress, you listen to people who've done it already. That's how it works. It's not for everybody. Some people can't cope with that level of kind of guidance. And, it's quite heavy-handed in some ways, because if you start making excuses and fuck around, it's not going to work. It's not half measures. You don't do bits and bobs of the program. You either do it and it works, or you don't do it and it doesn't work. So what JG is talking about is the kind of ritualistic practices. It's the commitment. These habitual processes are woven into our daily routines, which gives us an easier life, basically. It allows for us to manage our own selves, our routines, and, change the way we do things, the people we hang around with. And it just becomes ingrained into our daily routines. Okay, the third theme I've talked about is through helping others, and how that will allow for transmission of experience, strength, and hope. That is a key theme that runs through 12 steps. Maruna says that generative roles can provide fulfillment, embeddedness, and offer alternative sources of meaning. So that helping others really, really is the crux and the cornerstone of 12-step recovery. We only keep what we have by giving it away. It's full of cliches. There's so many cliches for everything, but it's simple. It's simple language, and we understand it. So JG talks about being an expert by experience. In NA, we talk about keeping what we have by giving it away. I've just said that. I can only keep my recovery by helping others in recovery. We talk about spirituality, altruistic. The amount of empathy and compassion I can offer to the still suffering addict, that is insurmountable. So it's that process of helping others, using your life narrative as not necessarily a failure, but almost a necessary sort of prelude to being authentic in helping others, because you've been there, you've walked that journey, and you've come out the other side. So LG talks about the enjoyment he gets from seeing people in recovery and making progress in life. LG actually went on to become a treatment worker, so taking his own recovery into the professional domain, and being useful both professionally and obviously still engaging with 12-step. It's instilling hope and aspirations back into them, carrying the message. Someone did that to me, and that's what I want to do. Get it out there that we can change our lifestyle. It is possible to go on and lead productive lives. So these quotes here are littered with hope as a narrative, hope in themselves, hope in the influence they can have with other people. So these quotes are really powerful to explain that. David Best talks about the social contagion of hope in recovery. And this is what Luke has to say. I could see LG and BG doing well. They were clean and sober. I used to go out robbing and scoring with them. There is something different about them now, and that gives me hope. It's a decision to either keep on offending, being a homeless junkie, or learn from what they have done in NA. And that's where Luke got his hope and inspiration from, seeing other people get well and just be part of the solution to society rather than a continual problem. And he then went on to pass on that message and that hope to other people. So we're talking here about this hierarchy of influence where people help other people. And the last theme I wanted to talk about is playing by the rules. conformity and moral agency through 12-step programs. Conformity to everything about the program. People in the madness of addiction sometimes lack the ability to play by the rules, whether you're criminal, whether you're just causing trouble for your family, that kind of inability to play by everybody else's rules. Well, that's what you have to do in 12-step. It's a negotiated democracy. There's etiquette in meetings. You have to learn the rules of engagement. You have to turn up on time. You get the opportunity to do service positions, whether it's making the tea, whether it's meeting and greeting new people, whether it's hosting the meeting. These are all ways to give back and be part of that recovery community. Respect, tolerance, and unity is very much preferred rather than individual personalities. And we see both, people who think they know better than the program, but generally the consensus is that people listen and grow in their own sobriety and progress through taking guidance from other people. So there's something about unity and social cohesion. There's something about putting yourself out there to be of maximum service and use to other people. And certainly the people I've interviewed have got this kind of super purpose in life where helping others gives them that kind of replacement buzz. I've heard that said from what they used to get from committing offences and taking drugs. When the drugs stop working and they get sick and tired of being sick and tired, recovery gives them that replacement kind of buzz. Darren, like I've already said, spent 22 years in prison. He got so violent he had to be removed from society. Today, he's clean and sober, and I know he still is, as to this day. This data was collected 7 years ago. Today, I try to be as honest as possible. I'm married to a copper. I'm part of the solution. I pay taxes today. Today, I am manageable. I've never had a fight or been arrested at a 12-step meeting. Today, I play by the rules. So 12-step can become a cognitive blueprint in making future decisions, which are centered around moral agency, doing the right thing. And I've already said that this kind of parallels with Giordano's cognitive theory of desistance, where it's incompatible for me now to do something like that. However, I decided not to make too much of that analysis. I just wanted to present in a very simplistic way what 12-step programs give and how they give them. Okay, this is quite a long quote, and I am conscious I've got 5 minutes left. This, for me, is one of the most powerful quotes that I found in my PhD. And this really, really demonstrates what progress can be achieved through 12-step programs in terms of supporting criminal desistance and developing this sense of moral agency. So Ari did 10 years in prison for armed robbery. And he says, now I couldn't even nick a penny sweet. I've been in trouble for a good 6 to 7 years. I do a lot for the community and recovery community. I don't want to die. I don't want drugs or alcohol. It doesn't give me freedom now. I do NA and I'm heavily involved in the fellowship. This has been my journey and I have not used. As I speak now, I'm totally abstinent. It feels beautiful. It's freedom on another level. Dodgy things don't sit right with me anymore. Yesterday, I accompanied a young woman to a medical, 27, broken, wanted to kill herself. The stuff she's been through and seen. She's struggling with drugs and I'm sat there not using. Just to be beside her and give her a bit of encouragement and to be next to her and try to guide her really is why I want to get up in the morning. Being there for another addict who is fucked and wants to die is why I do what I do. When he said that and I interviewed him, he broke down in tears and I broke down in tears as well. It was really emotional and really powerful. So that's kind of what I've presented in terms of data. There's a little bit more in the paper if you want to read it. But let's talk about hope. I'm going to wrap this up in the next 3 slides. But what 12-step programs can or might give an individual? It gives identification with others that you're not on your own. There's so many similarities rather than differences. It doesn't matter what drug you've used or whether it's just alcohol. The kind of patterns of destruction are very, very similar. It's a safe space to share and grow. Anonymity is one of the spiritual principles and traditions of how 12 steps work. Connection to others and unity, changing your playground, helping others whilst helping self, structure, stability, routine, and manageability, which can spill over into things like employment, parenting, relationships, and other areas of life as well, which give a sense of purpose. Being of service, people start to become active citizens. They have a stake in conformity. They have trust. They have acceptance, and it helps to overcome the stigmatized identities. Not always, it depends what you're trying to do, I guess, but I've certainly seen evidence of this, as a slow process. It doesn't happen overnight, but that's civic reintegration, being trusted to have your kids unsupervised, being trusted to drive them to swimming, all of these little steps, all of these little things that I've heard people say over the years. We express gratitude, which allows us to see the positives of what we've got, which can give us hope that, tomorrow might be a little bit better, but today's not that bad. We get inspiration from others by them experiencing their hope. And it can be used to signal desistance as well, whether that's to family, friends, whether that's to your probation officer, even prison officers, whoever's working with you. This can be a way of people kind of, demonstrating, not just talking, but demonstrating their commitment to something that is working for them. So I just wanted to finish off by saying, why does this matter, and how can criminal justice practitioners take something from this? It's only one way to do recovery. I'm not here, I know nothing about other programs of recovery. 12-step program acknowledges the zigzag journey of both recovery and desistance. Okay, it's not linear. We have setbacks, we have relapses, we pick ourselves up, we get back into the program. There's a need, therefore, to recognize these micro subtle processes of improvement rather than that grandiose binary, you've either succeeded or you've failed. That's one sort of take-home message that I want to get into people. It's not linked to any aspect of criminal justice. It is participation is purely voluntary, but it takes a lot to put investment and time into the program. It takes energy as well, but the rewards we get from it are pretty cool. It's more than just turning up for meetings. It's action and more action. There's a lot of literature to support strengths-based work. Lived experience is now becoming recognized as an asset within criminal justice through the use of recovery champions, people who are in a position to support other service users. Something that I'm hopefully going to be involved in is a project with the Department for Work and Pensions. They've come to me as a consultant as they bid for a long-term research project on how service users can support people on benefits who are also in treatment. So that's something I've got going through at the moment, based on obviously my knowledge of desistance, my paper on 12-step, my lived experience as well. So something I'm really passionate about is working on this project. So I'm going to finish off with this slide. Lived experience matters. Success stories should be taken seriously and counted as evidence. Shad Maruna said that. Recovery is more than just a tick box culture. 12-step programs mean something strong for people if they are passionate about this program and if it's working for them. So we need to listen to what people are saying. It's a painful process to look inwardly at ourselves. I know that from personal experience. And I know that the people who have taken part in this research and people I speak to on a daily basis, it's not an easy program. So that needs to be acknowledged, turning up, putting yourself through that. But the kind of successes that I'm seeing and the success of the people in this research, how it supports a life that does not in any way now involve drugs and crime, well, that's something to take from this. It's a subjective process, but if it's identified as a key priority from the person who's doing the 12-step program, we need to listen as practitioners. So I'm going to finish off with that. If you have any questions, you can email me, but I'm happy to take some questions now. Thanks, Vic.
Thank you very much, Sarah. A fascinating insight and drawing on both your data that you collected in relation to peer work and your own experiences of recovery, Sarah. So thank you for sharing that with us all today. And I loved how you took us through, for those who haven't experienced recovery and how that can be applied to the criminal justice landscape. And there was something that you said about seeing gratitude. I thought that was lovely how you described that. And whilst trying to obviously digest and my mind was wandering, thinking about gratitude and having worked in prisons like you have, that seeing gratitude, it's quite hard to spot, isn't it, in penal settings? Do we ever give praise? Do we ever give thanks? We could apply that to all sorts of organisations, couldn't we? Could you say a bit more about gratitude and give us all a bit of insight into why that's so important? But then equally, could we do more, as practitioners or even users or people in recovery or wherever we are about spotting gratitude and acknowledging it? Could you say a bit more, Sarah? Because I know you're doing some work around prison officers as well, aren't you? And sorry, my mind's racing. Carry on.
Yeah, it's a real tough one. I just know that when you start to look at what you've got going for you in your own life, actually, it's not that difficult to write 10 things that you're grateful for. Our lives, I mean, I think anybody, whether you're in a 12-step program or not, could benefit from just pausing and writing 10 things that they're grateful for. Try it, because when you actually are present in the moment, rather than worrying that you've got to pick the kids up or whatever, your life's out of control, actually there is a lot to be grateful for. And it's that shift in mindset. All of the people that I interviewed were no longer in prison. I would expect it to be quite difficult or more difficult to express anything gratitude related when you're behind your door for 23 hours a day. But people do get recovery. They get 12-step recovery within prisons. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking of that context of punishment, isn't it? And it's all about what you've done wrong and what are the risks, and actually gratitude doesn't, where is the space for that, for practitioners to create those dialogues around initiating new ways of thinking or revived ways of thinking, of actually looking at what's good.
I think one of the things that I hear a lot as well is that once you 12 steps full of paradoxes, it's full of like cliches, like you've got to surrender to win. You wouldn't walk into a boxing ring, get absolutely battered and walk out feeling like a champion, but the minute you admit you're fucked and powerless and you have this, we talk about it as a gift of desperation. I'm so on my knees that I brought myself into this program. I'm so grateful to be here, which does seem like a paradox for people who don't struggle with addiction.
Yes.
How could you be grateful for being at complete rock bottom?
Yeah.
But at least that gives you a stepping stone on which to build. Yeah. If that makes any kind of sense.
And okay, so this work is an extension of the work that you've been doing around peers, but also you work more recently around prison officers, and you've done some stuff on that, and your own experiences of being a prison officer as well. What is it about this that's motivated you to do this piece of work then? What?
Yeah, I think I never had plans to write this paper until I went back into recovery during lockdown. And I started to then think, I've heard that said in my PhD. So I just thought, and then I started to research what was actually out there, making links between 12-step programs and desistance. And I couldn't really find too much. And I just thought it would be really useful for criminal justice practitioners to understand from somebody who transcends all different camps, if you like, and that crossover between professional identity as an ex-prison officer, but also my identity as being in 12-step. And I thought, if I can just get it out there as this being a different way of doing recovery, you know,
which is very different, isn't it, to treatment?
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, and if you force somebody to go to a 12-step program, it wouldn't work.
No,
you know, if you said, if you don't do this because you're going to be punished in this particular way, you get instrumental compliance at best, but you wouldn't get the true benefits of the program. So that is the point I'm trying to make, is that people give up a lot of time, you know, every single day to do these practices and these tools and these things, and that needs to be acknowledged as important. And if the people say that it's important for them, then who are practitioners to kind of overrule that and say, but no, you need to go to this and you need to do that? And that's kind of the basis of what I'm trying to say. Having heard and understand the program myself, because I've been through it, that if people are saying it is working for them, then maybe practitioners need to understand a little bit more about how it's working, why it's working. And hence that's why I wrote this paper.
Yeah, and certainly for people in prison, I think as well, lockdown stopped opportunities to engage in programs like AA and NA, didn't they? Because they couldn't have contact with those wider networks, and how challenging that was for the recovery community during that time. And obviously, you know, it's a topic close to my heart around access to technology in our prisons is severely hampered. But what about sort of digital poverty and is accessing, you know, those communities? And you talked about how wonderfully now, you know, technology's allowed, you know, for you to engage with people in recovery from all over the world, for example. What about serving different groups, for example, women's groups? You know, I'm thinking about the sort of cultural differences as well, or is 12 steps can be applicable to all sorts of different communities?
Yeah, there are men only meetings, there are women only meetings. I'm in a couple of WhatsApp groups that is just all females. But I mean, obviously there are gender differences and cultural differences where you can't identify the similarities. However, you know, the diversity of most of the meetings that I go to, it doesn't necessarily matter what cultural or gender background you come from or sexual orientation. There's so much commonality with our journeys, of what it was like, what we've done, and what it's like now.
Based on your work, Sarah, what advice would you give to listeners, or requests would you make to the community that are listening in and reading about your ideas and application? What requests would you make to our community around this?
Just get to know more about how the program works and the ways in which it does work, and how it, you know, when we talk about supporting offenders, you know, it's not a one size fits all anyway. You know, we should be sort of tailoring interventions to suit the individual. If people are saying 12-step is working for them, find out more, understand the actual time that they're investing into themselves, and most importantly, how it's benefiting them and where it's taking them. You know, almost like a timeline of we have like speakers where they spend about half an hour and they talk about what it was like, what they did, and where they are today. You know, any kind of narrative around that would help to understand what 12-step can give, just to get life back on track. It is such a simple program. You know, I have these conversations with people at work. Everybody could benefit from a program like this. You know, just to
Yeah,
live by. It's such a simple program.
and that's what I was going to ask you about, the wider application of this 12-step model that you've summarized for us today, for those of you that don't know anything about what 12 steps is. I mean, I think we're all familiar with the phenomena, aren't we? You know, oh, sorry. Uh-oh. And I can't okay. How funny. So yeah, so it's wider application. What about criminal justice practitioner training in terms of, you know, awareness raising, that sort of stuff? Would you like to see that at sort of from a policy level?
Yeah, I mean, the problem you've got though with 12 step is that the principles around sort of anonymity and confidentiality, you know, a lot of people wouldn't be comfortable in talking to, you know, sharing their experiences because it brings it into the public domain. You know, that's the safe space we have. I don't give a shit. I'm just quite happy to talk about this because like I say, I cross across both camps, practitioner and, you know, in a program. So I'm happy to do that. I certainly think that there's definitely some further research that needs to be done. You know, I literally, I didn't go out specifically looking for this data.
Yeah.
Obviously the ethics around researching and collecting data within 12 steps as well would be quite sensitive.
Yes.
Given the principles that govern the program, you know. And I've had this conversation numerous times. Would I be exploiting people for my own research output? But that's never been my intention. My intention when I saw this paper published was not because it's all about me. I'm not like that. I just want people to understand from somebody who's got a little bit of authenticity in talking about it, because I've been there and I'm still there.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And thanks for your time, Sarah, and your energy and your insights. Always excellent to listen to you. And I'm glad we've had an opportunity to share that with people listening out there. Thanks to everyone for tuning in today. It's always a pleasure to do these things. Hope to see you all again. I think our next session is again in May. We've got Professor Mike Nellis. Again, looking at the sort of prison landscape, focusing on Barlini, HMP Barlini, and entitled yeah, so sorry, I'm losing my words here. I think I'm hungry. Thanks so much, Sarah, and everyone for tuning in. Please do reach out to us. Are you happy, Sarah, for people to contact you about
Yeah.
work? And you extended that invitation. Thanks so much. That's what we want, isn't it? Dialogue and synergy and community around thinking. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care, all of you. See you soon.